creation is more difficult than destruction. Good stories take years, decades to be written, but they can be destroyed in a single event. This event of unparalleled literary destruction happened in Naruto, with Madara being stabbed in the back by Black Zetsu out of nowhere. This is the single worst scene in the history of manga, by many reasons. And today we're gonna talk about one of those reasons, Black Zetsu, and how he destroyed Naruto in a single episode. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe to this channel if you like my content. Zetsu has always been a mysterious, dark character, a member of the Akatsuki that was introduced in the very end of Naruto Part 1. But Zetsu in the beginning was not a very important character whatsoever. He was a plot device. He was the information guy in the Akatsuki. His ability was to essentially travel through the ground and relay information to the more important villains. He also cleaned up after the Akatsuki. We saw that he ate the body doubles that Itachi and Kisame used to delay the Leaf Ninjas in the Kazekage rescue mission, but his main goal was to serve as the information guy. He was a spy. He could infiltrate very difficult locations and see battles that were taking place. He also served as an observer to many fights so that he could relay commentary to the audience. This is most prominent in the Sasuke vs Itachi fight, where Zetsu is watching and telling everything about the fight for the audience. This is a very common trope in shonen manga / anime, where there is someone or even more than one person watching a fight and then they comment about the fight and therefore they give the information to the audience. But that was pretty much it. Zetsu was not that important. He had a nice design, you know, he was a black and white plant guy. It caught your eye for sure, and his personality was mostly dark and funny with white Zetsu contrasting black Zetsu, but nothing much more than that. He had a much bigger role in the War Arc when white Zetsu was used as an army to fight the Shinobi Alliance, and black Zetsu served as a spy still, traveling through the ground, but we never really thought too much about Zetsu. I've never seen anyone saying that Zetsu is their favorite Naruto character, or that Zetsu is even in their top 10 favorite Naruto characters. He wasn't a bad character, but he wasn't that important. He wasn't very worked on, flashed out. Nothing major was done to Zetsu. Even him being the army of the bad guys was essentially not very important because white Zetsus were fodder, let's be real. It wasn't as though we were fighting against a very powerful enemy. Sure, they could transform into other people that they ate chakra from, but still, that's not a very big deal. Naruto dealt with that very easily. It was kind of glossed over, to be honest. And I agree with that decision. Zetsu was by no means the more interesting villain in the War Arc. Even Kabuto, which I'm not a very big fan of, was more interesting than him. But Zetsu still served his purpose in the narrative. As I said before, he is a plot device character. And this isn't a problem, really. Not every character needs to be Don Corleone. Some characters can be a little one-dimensional if they're not too important. If they have a nice design and a cool personality, it's fine if they are not too fleshed out. But then we have a big problem. Kishimoto was forced by Shonen Jump to kill the best villain in the entire series and introduce the worst villain in the entire series, and I would argue in the entire history of manga, so that they could have a sequel after that based on the family of said villain. And of course, I'm talking about Kaguya here, the worst character ever made. And she is obviously a very big problem for a multitude of reasons, but this video is not about her. This video is about her right-hand man, quite literally. So when Kishimoto was forced to introduce Kaguya, he didn't have a setup for that because he wasn't planning on doing that. He also had barely any foreshadowing for Kaguya. Madara mentioned her once, and then one chapter before she showed up, we have that shot of Kaguya looking from above in the sky and the infinite Tsukuyomi and all that, and that's it. That's the foreshadowing for Kaguya. If you compare that to Madara, who was foreshadowed since Naruto vs Sasuke in Part 1, the Valley of the End, that's night and day. This was a problem. Kishimoto didn't really have a way of introducing Kaguya that would work in the narrative. Anything Kishimoto would do to introduce Kaguya would be unsatisfying, because there was simply no space for a new, powerful villain in the narrative. Madara was the final boss, who was the only other villain left in Naruto at that point of the story. That was Black Zetsu. So Kishimoto had no other choice other than using Black Zetsu to facilitate Kaguya's return. Kishimoto had to pull some major writing contortionism for this plot point to make an ounce of sense events in the Naruto universe. And this is the main point of the video: how Zetsu ruined the entire Naruto story in a single episode. So just having Madara dying and being replaced by the worst character ever written would have been a very, very bad thing from the get-go, of course. But if that was the only thing that happened, that would be bad, but still the ending of Naruto would be ruined. But not the rest of the story. The rest of the story would be there, it would be fine. I mean, you can watch the rest of the story and just skip over the Kaguya part and it's fine. This is what I do essentially every time I read through the manga. You can forget that, oh, okay, it's just the bad part, let's skip over it. The problem is that what Kishimoto did with Zetsu changes the entire story, destroying it in the process. Kishimoto did a major retcon, aka retroactive continuity, which is defined as a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events, typically used to facilitate a dramatic plot shift or account for an inconsistency in the story. In the War Arc, we found out about Zetsu's backstory. We saw that he was Madara's will crystallized into a physical form that Madara left behind before he died so that he could keep the world and Obito in check and make sure he would return. And we thought, oh, okay, that makes sense. Black Zetsu was really trying to make things happen for Madara. Yeah, however, this changed. Black Zetsu was now Kaguya's will, which is already a retcon, but this is not the bad part. If he was only Kaguya's will, that would be bad because it's associated with Kaguya, therefore it's going to be bad anyway. But it would still not have ruined the entire story. The problem is that in order for Kaguya's return to make any sense whatsoever, Kishimoto had to change the entire story. He had to make Black Zetsu the main character in the story, at least as far as the universe in the Naruto world is concerned, because Black Zetsu pulled every single string since the beginning. Now that Kaguya is a thing, Black Zetsu is apparently what kept the story of the Shinobi world going. He made sure that the Uchiha and the Senju would fight each other for all eternity until he found a suitable candidate to be the vessel that would return Kaguya to the world, until he found Madara, which became his vessel. He manipulated the Uchiha clan, the Senju clan, essentially every single character in the Naruto series so that Kaguya could return. He even says that the entire Shinobi history led us to this moment where my mother has returned. This is the major retcon. Zetsu was behind everything, and I assure you that when Kishimoto wrote Naruto for the first time, and up until very late in the story, this wasn't in his mind. First, because there isn't any foreshadowing, and second, because it's simply a terrible thing for you to put in your story. Now, retcons are not always bad. They can work very well sometimes. A very prominent example is Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father. In the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, that wasn't a thing at all. That wasn't in George Lucas's mind. This was never supposed to be a thing in episode 4 of Star Wars. But then when episode 5 came along, they thought, okay, I think Darth Vader should have a more personal relationship with the main character. How about Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father? It can be justified. I mean, Obi-Wan could be like telling a white lie in episode 4 to Luke when he explained about his dad, and we can just say it's this big reveal then. And of course that in episode 5, up until the big reveal moment, they foreshadowed the crap out of that plot point. So even though that's a big retcon, it works very well, and that's arguably the most important plot point in the entire Star Wars universe. If Darth Vader wasn't Luke's father, Star Wars would have been a very different story. There's also another example in the Naruto series, which is very much disputed. No one will ever know for sure if this is a retcon or not, but many people claim that Itachi actually being a good guy was a retcon that Kishimoto came up with after he created Itachi and after he thought about the massacre of the Uchiha clan. Now, they may or may not be the case, but either way, it worked very well for the story. It gave Sasuke further motivation, and it made the Naruto story more interesting. So retcons are not necessarily a bad thing, but they can be a terrible thing. You may be asking me, wait, why is it so bad that Black Zetsu was the main character in the story and he manipulated all the events in the story? First of all, Black Zetsu, as I said before, was not an important character. He was a plot device meant to give information to the Akatsuki. That was the character's function. He was never foreshadowed to be the grand master behind everything in the world. Sure, he was mysterious, but if you're gonna do something as grandiose as that, you have to foreshadow that and to give clues to the audience, because pulling this out of nowhere is complete BS. Second of all, Zetsu takes away the agency from every single character in the universe except for himself. What I mean by that is that the actions that the characters took during the entire story, Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, Sakura, everyone, every single arc in the story was premeditated by Zetsu because he was pulling the strings all along. Especially Naruto and Sasuke, because they are related to the most important clans in the story. The clan Zetsu definitely interfered with the most. And sure, Naruto is Uzumaki and not a Senju, but he is still the incarnation of Ashura. And yeah, the incarnation thing is also a very bad thing that happened late in Naruto, but still, this is about Zetsu. Now, taking away a character's agency is very bad. Think about it. Oh, the Chunin exams. Naruto is fighting Gaara. Okay, this was because Zetsu planned everything. Naruto is coming after Sasuke because Sasuke wants to train under Orochimaru. Never mind, it was Zetsu all along. Nobody cares. The characters were acting exactly according to Zetsu's will. And this is even worse for Madara, because he was completely manipulated by Black Zetsu, which is just... I hate that. Storytelling 101 says that your characters must be active agents in your story and not passive agents. Active characters take action themselves in the story and they change the events that are unfolding. Passive characters wait for things to happen and they simply react. Active characters are more compelling because they have a will of their own. Now, of course, not every single character is going to be active all the time. This is impossible, essentially. There are things that the characters are going to have to react to, but as a rule of thumb, you should make your characters more active rather than passive. There are exceptions for that, of course. There are always exceptions in storytelling. There can be interesting passive characters, but in general, you should have more active characters than passive characters at least. And making so that Zetsu is the mastermind behind everything takes away the agency from every single character in the story, meaning that they essentially become passive characters reacting to Zetsu's plan, so that Kaguya can return. The meaning of everything, every remarkable event that has ever happened in the Naruto series that you've enjoyed watching / reading thus far loses meaning because everything was done according to the plan of this minor character that no one really cares about. Zetsu, a character that's not that interesting and that had no development in the story. Do you see the problem here? Do you see how this retcon destroyed the entire series? Because now every time a cool moment happens, Naruto is being taken over by the Nine Tails' chakra, you're gonna remember Zetsu is behind that. That's not very interesting anymore. This isn't so much as retroactive continuity, but retroactive destruction of a story, which is very disheartening. The only alternative you have is to essentially exclude this point of the story in your own head canon, in which Black Zetsu was never the mastermind of the story and that Kaguya even never existed, because that's another problem entirely. But if you don't do that, and if you have that knowledge reading back, then you're just not going to enjoy Naruto as much as the first time you read it, and this wasn't a thing. Now, I've heard counter arguments for this retcon not even being a retcon, and it is very much a retcon because it's information we never received before that changes the entire understanding of the story so that a plot point can be introduced in the middle of the story out of nowhere. This is the definition of a retcon. Do not argue about that because you're gonna look stupid. And I've seen other people saying that Obito / Toby being the leader of the Akatsuki was a retcon just like Zetsu. And no, Toby / Obito being the leader of the Akatsuki is not a retcon. It's blatantly obvious that Kishimoto intended that to be the case since the beginning of part 1, essentially. Toby being the leader of the Akatsuki and Zetsu being the mastermind behind the entire world are two very different things, and let me explain why. When Kishimoto introduced the Akatsuki in the very ending of part 1, he didn't show Toby because Toby technically wasn't in the Akatsuki at the time. He introduced introduced Toby in the first arc of Naruto Shippuden. Remember that in the manga, in the original story, this introduction of Toby was done after we saw Obito's backstory, with him being crushed by the rock and all that. In the manga, that happens between parts 1 and 2 of the series. So, when Toby is introduced, people could already puzzle things together and say, hey, hold on, this Toby guy has a hair that's very similar to Obito's. He also has only one hole in his mask, and coincidentally is on the right side. This guy could be Obito. And yes, people were figuring that out. Everyone knew that Toby was Obito before he got unmasked, and most people already knew that way before the War Arc. So yeah, it was very much foreshadowed that Toby was Obito. Now you may say, oh no, but he wasn't foreshadowed to be the leader of the Akatsuki. And no, he definitely was foreshadowed to be the leader of the Akatsuki. Yes, Toby acted like a goofball, and then after he quote-unquote dies from Data's explosion, we get the reveal that he is the de facto leader of the Akatsuki. And one of the coolest scenes in Shippuden when he says, I am Madara Uchiha, with the lightning in the background and all that. Toby, before the grand reveal that he is Madara, was essentially comic relief for the story. Naruto is a shonen manga. It never really had characters that were solely focused on comic relief. Yes, there are jokes everywhere essentially, but no single character is simply done for the sake of being a joke. And Toby was that character. It was very dissonant. He was the only character who was pure and simple comic relief. At face value, Toby had no purpose in the story whatsoever. He was only there to be funny. And this raises questions. Well, there's maybe more to him than we might know. Storytelling 101. Never include things in your story that have no purpose. Now sure, you could argue that Toby's purpose was to be funny, but this wasn't really what Naruto was known for. Characters should have a bigger purpose. And if Toby was just comic relief and he had just died in Data's explosion there, that would have been just very weird, because think about it, he would have had no purpose in the story whatsoever except for being a funny guy. Of course, Kishimoto had something in mind for him. Ever since his introduction, ever since the Obito flashbacks, hell, ever since the first episode probably, when Kakashi said the words that people who betray their friends are worse than scum, quoting Obito in the bell test, that was the setup already. Kishimoto already knew that Obito was the leader of the Akatsuki by that point. And when Toby was revealed to be Madara, Madara had been foreshadowed a lot in the story, and by that point in the story we were supposed to believe that he was Madara anyway, so yeah, that works too, because damn, Madara is the actual leader of the Akatsuki, the guy from the statues, the guy that everybody's been mentioning that's a legendary ninja. It's nothing like the Zetsu Retcon. It's not even a retcon. You could call it a plot twist, because yeah, we didn't technically know that Toby was the leader of the Akatsuki and was quote-unquote Madara when he was the funny guy, but Kishimoto definitely planned for that. Zetsu, on the other hand, he has no development as to him being the mastermind behind the entire shinobi history, and he only became that because he was required to by plot. And if you don't take that fact off your mind when you are reading or watching Naruto again, you essentially will stop yourself from enjoying the series. So I do recommend you to take that away from your headcanon. If you want to see these problems with the Naruto story fixed, watch my Rewriting Naruto series right here. Subscribe to this channel and like this video for more content like this. Thanks for watching.